Okay. But in this methodology, for me, in this discussion, I always have to start with, when I have this discussion, with the numbers. And I don't go as in depth as I just did with you here, but I have to start with real numbers to make that case. So I typically don't go into this discussion with them either, but I'm giving you background, right? Because I want to kind of give you a behind the scenes of building that case. We'll get to all of the bullets, the ammunition, in a second, but we'll continue with that building the case. All right, anything else? Any other questions? Yep, good? Okay. So there is another piece of work that is a whole other presentation. This is not for every client at all, at all, at all. These are for clients or A&D firms that are very focused on the future. If you have sort of a transactional approach, this is not for that particular customer at all. If they are very focused on their vision, so you have a select group of organizations that are interested in this sort of work. This is our research, which is based on the concept from Peter Schwartz. Peter Schwartz worked at, I'll start with this one. Peter Schwartz worked for Royal Dutch Shell. He was their futurist strategist. He wrote a very good book, although it's very dry. It's on my bedside table, called The Art of the Long View. So if you're interested in it, it's good, but it's dry, so just be ready for that. There are no pictures in it or anything like that. But the idea is how you plan for the future. And so he goes through the process of scenario planning, which some of your organizations may have done already. Others may not, or be unfamiliar with this process, and that's okay. We at Herman Miller believe in scenario planning so much that this is our third go-round at it since 2000. So what you do is you start with a question and then you build scenarios that could take place. Now, not all of them are rosy, sort of peachy situations, right? You want to be aware of, from the VUCA sort of work, the things that might be unsettling, right? Or as a dis-ease for many organizations. So you focus on that because you want to be able to build support around it, what happens, okay? So that's the idea of scenario planning sort of in a very brief nutshell, which doesn't give it any justice whatsoever. But our scenario question that we started off with is how will work change in 2018, okay? So through a long amount of research of 2 years, and not only our research folks, but also a group of about 50 people from across the globe, academic and business professional folks, all of this sort of stuff. We came up with 3 different scenarios, which I won't discuss today, but out of that come what are called, through Peter Schwartz, propositions. And propositions are likely realities, okay? So stay with me. These are what we consider 8 of the likely realities for the future of work in 2018. Okay, so put your futurist cap on for a second. And these are sort of very high pie in the sky terms, but it's what we see as happening or what will happen in the future, so that we can have a more meaningful conversation with our colleagues, with clients, with A&D partners about what the future holds, okay? Now, I'm not just saying that these 8 are the only things that are going to happen and nothing else is going to happen. That's not the case. I am just saying that I'm focusing on 8 in this discussion and how we kind of go about the talk of propositions and these likely realities of what will happen. So I'm not going to talk about all 8, so whew to that, right? Goodness gracious. And I'm not going to do a deep dive on this. Again, a whole other presentation, but I'm not here all the time, so I'm going to give you as much as I can. So the idea here with this first one is called informed choice. It's the hyper idea of beyond sort of Yelp, but the idea that individuals make choices that are based on their connections, their networks. They can sort of influence news and social interactions that they choose to. And we all have preferences on Facebook or Twitter or whatever social media you use based on news reports that you like and other news news organizations that you don't like, right? We all have that. So the idea here is, how will this idea of informed choice be linked to the future of work for people? And one of them might be one organization that, when we planned this out, this can be a whole 4-hour process where you plot these propositions out for an organization. They determine which ones might be more or less compelling. One of the things that we talked about with one organization in terms of informed choice was, could they create an app? If they created an open work environment, could they create an app that shows where people are working? So the person sort of checks in there, and if Beth needs to have a meeting with Bob, she doesn't have to go through the whole space or try and figure out where Bob is. She just sort of goes to her app on her phone. Bob's sitting here today. She has a meeting at 10 o'clock with him, and so now she's going over there to that location. So it's this idea of using information, using this informed choice in order to help people move along in the process. It is also being able to access information in real time. So we talked about this at Mount Sinai in Toronto hospital, about an app that may allow individuals to determine, if they're the caregiver, what time someone is finished with their appointment so that they can pick them up, as opposed to kind of waiting around in the parking lot. Or maybe the person that's getting services doesn't have the ability to operate a phone to contact that person. So how can this then impact the future of a working environment for them? And I know this is sort of higher sort of thinking for many of our clients, for many customers, but this is just one of the things that could happen. Another one is this digitally mediated relationships. It's the idea that digitally mediated relationships are the default mechanism. So right now we may communicate with each other based on a conference call, but what happens when we start using Skype and FaceTime more often with our clients? So when I had this conversation in San Francisco, the A&D firm said, well, all of my clients are already using FaceTime and Skype. They're already doing it right now. Well, we know that that's not happening everywhere, right? It may be happening in this little tiny area of San Francisco with these one super focused, media clients, but it's not happening everywhere. So the idea is, what happens when folks are using this method as the default for them on a regular basis? So the example I give is, I'm typically, when I'm in Dallas, I work out of the Dallas showroom, and I have a colleague. She's not here, so her name is Shelley, and she there's about 15 of us that work there in the showroom, and Shelley sometimes likes to call her children on FaceTime, and she turns on the volume, and she also likes to introduce her children to us so that her children know kind of what she's doing during the day and how she's working. And so she'll kind of walk around with the phone and show her, Dara, here, these are my kids, all that sort of stuff. And that's fine, right? Totally fine. It's okay. But what happens when it's 4 of us doing that, 5 of us doing that, 8 of us doing that, all 15 of us doing that? And we're not just doing that with our kids, but it's also, we have a client and we're needing to meet with them via Skype or FaceTime or whatever sort of video technology they're using. So what happens when you go beyond one person doing this to everybody doing this? So the work environment, what we see is that this is going to happen in some form or fashion. So what happens, how does the space then begin to create an environment where people are using video technology quite freely and regularly, as someone might just pick up the telephone or use their cell phone, okay? So think about how often you might use your desk phone or your cell phone, then think about that and everybody using video technology, and how that might change the spaces in which we work. So I don't know the answer to that. I'm just saying this is what could happen, okay? And so we have a discussion about what you could do in the space to have that conversation. Another one is around swarm-focused work. I'll leave it at 3 and then we'll move on. So swarm-focused work is this idea that so true fact, one third of all workers in the U.S. are working in a contract or part-time role. Does anyone know someone that's doing contract or part-time work at all? Generally, it's lots of hands that go up, okay? So a third of all U.S. folks are doing that. And for someone that also teaches, aside from being at Herman Miller, you know, I do that as well. So the thought about swarm-focused work is that individuals are working in many different swarms at one time. Sometimes that's based on necessity, and sometimes that's based on desire. So for me, teaching is a desire. For others, it may be that they need to have multiple jobs to sustain, you know, a living sort of environment for themselves and their family, and so they have to be in multiple swarms. The other thought process in swarm-focused work is individuals that are not linked to an organization, but they're linked to a group of contract folks that move around from location to location. So you think about, others might know this as the Hollywood model of working, where you have a group of people that are focused on set design and makeup and props and all that sort of good stuff, and they work on the latest and greatest action film, and then when that's done, then they move to another area and they work on the latest and greatest Western, or whatever it might be. So the thought in both of these situations is that individuals are not linked from a cultural standpoint to the main organization, okay? It's different than working in teams. It's the idea that we're moving from place to place, and we must be great at the one thing that we do, or else we can be kicked out of the swarm. Does that make sense, right? So if you're good at blue widget making, you must continue to be the best blue widget maker, because someone else will take you, or someone else will take that position. At the same time, there isn't an organization that they are at that is supporting them from a full-time basis, bless you, to nurture them, to support them over time, to learn new skills, to become more focused, to take on additional roles, responsibilities, to grow them. They're kind of stuck in this portal of contract work movement, and as they continue. So the idea is, how does that impact the workspace when you have people that may be disconnected, and you have space where they're just there for a certain amount of time and then need to move on into another location, right? Which for A&D people, you may have some of those folks right now, yes, that are working in sort of a contract situation for your customers. Clients may have those situations right now where you have actual customers or employees that you hire for a project by project basis.